Racial prejudice tears at the fabric of our society, causing pain, grief, and division. Many researchers question whether this prejudice is something we learn as children through our parents and environment, or if it evolves naturally from implicit bias, which are attitudes or associated stereotypes about a social group that we form unconsciously. Is there any way to overcome this prejudice? While the answers are varied and complex, new research shows that the key to addressing these issues lies at the very heart of the matter, in diversity itself.
This notion that there's unconscious bias out there, I think it's undeniable that people have this. And the question that has really rattled developmental psychologists try to understand what are the origins of this bias and when does this form. And traditionally, the way scholars have thought of this is that it's the product of years and years of experience and exposure to sort of cultural stereotypes through the media. And this led to the way social psychologists thought about this, which was this stuff is just gradually learned and it takes many years to form.
That's Andrew Barron, Associate Professor of Psychology at the University of British Columbia.
As a developmental psychologist, we saw that as a testable hypothesis. And so a number of colleagues and myself then went after this question and just tried to understand just how early implicit bias forms. And really the focus of my work and that of a number of other scholars in the field is to understand how early in development does it form, how does it form, like what are the causes or sources of implicit bias, and then most critically, I think, for the practical benefit in society is how do you change implicit bias and when in the lifespan is an optimal time to do so?
Barron believes implicit biases actually begin much earlier than we ever imagined.
Starting in utero, we're forming preferences for familiar stimuli for every sense modality that we have access to. So sounds that we hear in utero will show a preference for after birth. There's smells, tastes, will show a preference for these things shortly after birth, things that are familiar to us. And I think the maybe rule of thumb from an evolutionary perspective is if it didn't kill me the first time, it maybe isn't so bad, right? And so if you have the opportunity to experience it a second, third, fourth time, then maybe there's some degree of safety there.
Barron says that without early intervention, race biases can emerge as young as preschool age.
What's remarkable is really that the strength of these biases that form so early in childhood, and these certainly by the preschool age, mirror the strength of the bias that we see when we measure the same stuff in adults. And so this is really underscoring the importance of trying to reveal when these biases can be changed, right? And what are the optimal ways to change them? Because effectively what we're showing is these aren't learned through years and years of experience, that they're acquired within the first few years of life. And the strength with which they're manifested in the minds of these young children is no different than the strength of those biases when we study them at college-age students or people much older than that.
Research findings show that exposure early on in life to people who are different from us is extremely important in forming positive associations and lessening implicit bias.
Travel and expose, really important, especially as it gives you an opportunity to form positive associations with different groups. And that's one of the best ways in which the literature has shown you can try to counteract any negative implicit bias that you may have to unfamiliar groups.
Talking about race is difficult, yes, but an important step to overcoming fear of the unknown and breaking stereotypes.
I grew up in Denver, Colorado, and I went to public schools, and I was growing up when we had mandated busing for desegregation. And so in my elementary years, I was a racial minority in terms of the demographics of my school. And one day outside the lavatory in the hallway in first grade, one of my friends who was white came up to me and she said, "Hey, Jenny, we should start a white girls club." And I kind of must have looked confused a little bit because then she went on to say, because we're only one of 6 white girls in this class.
That's Dr. Jennifer Harvey, professor of religion at Drake University and author of Raising White Kids, Bringing Up Children in a Racially Unjust America.
Just as it was beginning to sink in, and I hadn't even thought yet about what it meant, our white teacher happened to walk by and overheard this and said, "Girls, I don't ever want you to talk like that again." And she just shut down this conversation, of course, because she was concerned something really racist was happening. But what she didn't perhaps realize is that I, being a first grader, I had no idea what we had done wrong. I didn't want to cross my teacher, and so I was embarrassed, and I was really afraid then, like, okay, I don't want to go near whatever that was again. And so it was a really missed opportunity to lean in and do some important teaching. And those kind of moments happen in children's lives all the time, especially white children when it comes to white adults, because so many white adults have so much anxiety about talking about race with our kids.
Harvey says many parents think that ignoring racial discussions may be the best way to prevent racial biases from forming. However, she and Barron say the opposite is true.
They need to be exposed to the idea that there's bias in the world and to recognize its manifestations so they can actually do something about it. They need to it's something you have to be active about. You can't look the other way, ignore it, quote unquote, be colorblind, because that doesn't do anything to actually change the formation of the bias and the perpetuation of it.
Harvey encourages parents to engage in discussions whenever the teaching moment presents itself.
So, for example, if my child has pointed at someone in the grocery store, I'm going to first apologize to that person, just like I would any time my kid says something rude, and say something like, I don't know if my child pointing at you bothered you, but I'm very sorry. And then I'm going to turn to my child and say something like, yes, honey, that person has beautiful brown skin, and we don't point at people. That's not polite. That's a cue to me that I have not yet gotten my kid in enough desegregated, truly multiracial spaces, because if I was, they wouldn't have pointed in the first place.
It's important to expose children to diversity and bias early on. But what about gaining greater awareness as an adult? Michael Acuna is a consultant with the Office of the Independent Monitor of the Denver Police and Sheriff's Departments. As police agencies across the U.S. look inward, consultants like Acuna host workshops to help promote awareness around implicit racial bias. In one of the exercises, he supplies photos of a person wearing two different outfits, one professional and the other casual. The participants are then asked to make assumptions about that person based on what he or she is wearing.
Depending on the group that we're actually doing this workshop with, their exposure or lack thereof kind of shows in the ways they describe the images and the ways they see the people. One thing that we try to make sure that we educate on is that it's not necessarily a bad thing to have these ideas, but what are you doing to complex that narrative? Are you having a discussion with this person that you have this idea around? Have you ever had a discussion with somebody that makes you feel uncomfortable because you have these stigmatized ideas? And if you haven't, why not? And what can you do to broaden your scope and have more conversations with people who may be stigmatized in your mind?
Working with adults every day, Acuna encourages parents to address this topic early on. Rather than just talk about why people are different, put your child in diverse settings so they gain first-hand exposure.
Even though you may not have any knowledge of what that event is, going to it and just being exposed to the culture and just being around people who are different, who have different ideas, but within these different ideas are still gathering as family, still gathering as community.
This summer, cities all around the country feature a variety of cultural festivals. Acuna suggests attending one as a family event. Mingle with people. Learn something new. Recognize that you might feel out of place at first, but those feelings will soon subside.
I want to have my kids exposed to as many different cultures, as many different people as possible. So I think the main thing in order to really break down the walls of implicit bias in these ideas is exposure. So if you can expose your young person as early as possible, I feel like that is the main thing that really keeps their mind open to the possibilities of who a person can be.
Dr. Jennifer Harvey's book, Raising White Kids, Bringing Up Children in a Racially Unjust America, is available now. You can learn more about all of our guests by visiting our website at viewpointsradio.org. Our writer-producer for this segment is Polly Hansen. Studio production by Jason Dickey. I'm Marty Peterson.
Viewpoints returns in just a moment.
What are you going to do with your old car? You can try selling it, you could junk it, or you can donate it to Heritage for the Blind. Your car will be towed away for free and your donation is tax deductible. Just call 1-800-835-1478. Heritage for the Blind accepts cars, vans, trucks, and boats. It doesn't matter if your vehicle runs or not. It will be towed away for free, and you'll be supporting those that need help. Heritage for the Blind is a nonprofit organization that helps the visually impaired live fuller lives. Call right now to donate your car, and as a special thank you, you'll receive a free 3-day vacation voucher to over 50 locations. Call Heritage for the Blind right now. Call 1-800-835-1478. Donating is easy, and your vehicle is towed away for free. Plus, you'll get a free vacation voucher for donating. Call now, 1-800-835-1478. That's 1-800-835-1478.
New research shows that healthy lifestyle choices may dramatically reduce the risk of dementia. 5 studies presented at the Alzheimer's Association International Conference 2019 in Los Angeles show that lifestyle factors such as a healthy diet and exercise may even counteract genetic risks for dementia. Dr. Maria Carrillo is Chief Science Officer at the Alzheimer's Association.
While there is no proven cure or treatment for Alzheimer's, a large body of research now strongly suggests that combining healthy habits promotes good brain health and reduces your risk of cognitive decline.
Along with a healthy diet and exercise, steps such as building a cognitive reserve through formal education and cognitively stimulating jobs also help provide maximum memory benefit. The new research suggests that adopting 4 or 5 healthy lifestyle factors rather than none or only one may reduce the risk of Alzheimer's dementia by nearly 60%. Find out more at alz.org.
Electric scooters are fun, easy to use, and seemingly all over the streets. But several new studies find that e-scooters are also causing a growing number of serious injuries. One study by the CDC shows that 45% of those hurt have head injuries, while another 27% have broken arms, wrists, or hands. Half of those hurt say a pothole or a crack in the street caused their crash. Dr. Vidor Friedman is president of the American College of Emergency Physicians.
Emergency physicians are treating an increasing number of scooter-related injuries. Many of these are serious and can be life-changing, but many of these injuries are avoidable. The number one thing you can do to avoid serious injury is to wear a helmet. Scoot safe and avoid an emergency.
Studies show that about a third of those hurt are first-time scooter riders. Dr. Friedman advises to start slowly, follow the rules of the road, and be an alert rider. More safety tips are online at emergencycareforyou.org/scootsafe.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Viewpoints is a production of MediaTrax Communications. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook to learn about upcoming shows and find a library of past programs on iTunes. Plus, you'll always find podcasts of our segments and information about our guests at viewpointsonline.net. Join us again next week for your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints. Coming up next week.
There's an old saying in Nepal that educating your daughter is like watering a flower in another man's garden.
What's being done to stop human trafficking in Nepal? Then,
the first barrier to get over with our customers is that freshness perception.
Farmer's Fridge is changing the vending machine game. I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.